Hello, I'm Amanda Walker and welcome to Inside America, a show that brings you insight and analysis of the biggest issues facing the United States right now. In this episode, Donald Trump's pivot on Iran, from an unprecedented bombing of nuclear facilities to a call for peace, all in just 48 hours.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Shortly after, the US president took to his favorite platform, Truth Social, to declare a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But it's far from clear if this is the end of anything, as the diplomatic world scrambles to keep up. Globally, the US strikes were met with alarm and caution, as well as some predictable praise.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
The US president has since lashed out at Israel and Iran, saying neither side knows what they're doing. Coming up, we'll look at why the US keeps going back for more Middle East conflict.
We just keep getting drawn back in despite these presidential promises, either on the campaign trail or in office, to not get back involved.
And we'll assess how Iranian Americans feel at this high-stakes moment.
Having grown up in a post-9/11 world, having to go through another hate-filled era against Middle Eastern Americans, that really worries me, and I feel like we're heading that direction.
President Trump's shifting views on how to handle Iran ultimately resulted in the decision to get involved militarily. It's at odds with his campaign promise to be a global peacemaker, which members of his own party have been at pains to remind him. Let's take a look at how we got here. Donald Trump campaigned on a pledge to end all wars immediately.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Once in office came this early assessment from his Director of National Intelligence, downplaying the nuclear threat from Iran.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
The following month, when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited President Trump in the White House, Iran was high on their agenda, with the US leader favoring a more diplomatic route.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious.
2 months later, Israel strikes. Donald Trump called the attacks excellent. The move shocked the region and left cracks in Donald Trump's coalition. Influential conservative media star Tucker Carlson broke ranks with the president, writing, "The United States should not at any level participate in a war with Iran. No funding, no American weapons, no troops on the ground. Going further, drop Israel, let them fight their own wars." President Trump then hit back on Truth Social, saying, "Somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." Carlson wasn't finished with Trump's perceived hawks. This explosive moment with Republican Senator Ted Cruz caught fire online.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump?
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe that...
We're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied, on behalf of Trump, that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
Israel.
High
stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Okay.
Their views appeared to be shared by voters. A recent YouGov America poll said that only 16% of Americans think their military should get involved in Israel's conflict with Iran. Despite that, the Trump administration thrust the US into conflict.
Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. When this president speaks, the world should listen.
Orders to drop bombs were quickly followed up with demands for a ceasefire, which initially appeared fragile, much to the president's frustration.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
So, a big show of military strength, but Donald Trump is still walking that line of peacemaker in chief, a role that seems very hard for a US president to stick to when it comes to the Middle East. Javed Ali worked as a senior official at the National Security Council during the first Trump administration. He was also in government during the Bush administration. I asked him why the US keeps getting involved in the region's conflicts. So we've heard presidents from both parties over the years say that they want to pull out of direct engagement in the Middle East. Why is it easier said than done?
So, Amanda, this is something that pretty much every U.S. president has said for the last several decades, and yet time and time again, just because of the dynamics in the region, the unpredictability, the U.S. interests that are also very keen in the region, we just keep getting drawn back in, despite these presidential promises, either on the campaign trail or in office, to not get back involved. And I think this is just the reality of the Middle East for the United States and the West in general.
So Trump is in militarily now. How much does that go against what he campaigned on?
Well, the issue with President Trump's use of military force with Iran or other sort of threats in the Middle East, even from what we saw in the first Trump administration, he was willing to use military force in sort of these one-off strikes, limited set of operations, but not mobilize tens of thousands of troops from U.S. bases or other bases overseas and push them into the Middle East. I just don't think that's his gut instinct, nor is that what his political or some of his political base wants.
So enough to appear decisive, but not too much to be accused of getting into a messy, long situation.
Correct. I was in government during the Bush years, and so, as we now know, the Bush approach was to go heavy, send in tens of thousands, if not more, troops into the region, focus on regime change, first in Iraq, and then potentially think about other countries. And then we got stuck in Iraq for probably longer than the Bush administration wanted, and then Obama stayed. But when Obama came in, he reversed that paradigm. It was a small footprint, not tens of thousands of troops, but maybe thousands or hundreds, and then using other tools to keep the U.S. safe and focus on counterterrorism. When Trump came into office in 2016, he also said, I don't want to get back involved in these forever wars. I want to remove the U.S., although we were involved in both Iraq and Syria, and there was conflict with Iran, too, during the Trump administration, if viewers remember that.
To what extent does that Bush era haunt and inform modern-day U.S. foreign policy?
Well, I think there's a cast a long shadow over U.S. foreign policy for all the reasons why that experiment or enterprise didn't work. And I don't say that lightly, and I actually had some insight to that even in the beginnings of my own career in the intelligence community. So, but looking at all the mistakes that were made, both at the policy level, the analytic world where I was in, the operational and tactical level with the military, I don't think the U.S. under any president and under any political stripe wants to do that again. Again, send in tens of thousands, if not more troops with this false hope that we are, by removing the leader of another Middle Eastern country, which we don't understand the culture, the history, the religion, the actual ethnic or demographic makeup of the people, that somehow we're going to get a Jeffersonian democracy to take root there. I just don't think that tracks with the history of the region and the political culture there. But time and time again, we see different administrations thinking that potentially regime change is an option.
Right. And with that history in mind, how would you characterize America's global influence right now?
I mean, this is an interesting question. President Trump has sort of pulled back the U.S. from sort of being the world's policeman, and he has sort of said that, I guess, paraphrasing his words. Doesn't mean, though, he doesn't want America to be weak. He keeps saying we're going to build the world's strongest military, we're going to have peace through strength.
Yeah, there is a bit of a contradiction there, right? Because he wants to be the peacemaker, but he wants to appear tough and strong on the global stage. Can you do both of those
Well,
things?
this was the Reagan doctrine, basically. So it's sort of a repeat, in a way, of that Reagan philosophy. We're going to build up the military to include nuclear weapons, but at the same time, we are not going to try and get involved in a hot war with the Soviet Union, because during the Cold War, that was the big concern. I think President Trump is on that same philosophical approach where, yes, we want to project power, we want to demonstrate to the world that we have this incredibly strong military, but he doesn't want to use it, I think, unless he has to.
Now, what can get forgotten in all of this is that Iran isn't just some abstract nuclear threat. It's a country of 90 million people who are living through this crisis. We went to speak to a local Washington, D.C. gathering of concerned global citizens about where they fear all of this is heading.
Can you destroy the Iranian nuclear program? My answer is no.
This panel discussion on Iran at a neighbourhood bookstore was planned before Israel's strikes. Now the conversation is even more urgent.
It just seems like we're in this moment. There's no going back.
It's not just the global leadership that's watching every twist and turn. People of all backgrounds are tuned in, especially Iranian Americans like Isabella Javedan.
Having grown up in a post-9/11 world, having to go through another hate-filled era against Middle Eastern Americans, that really worries me, and I feel like we're heading that direction.
What's it like watching this, knowing that there is a very unpredictable US president really dominating what could happen?
It's so scary. It's really, because it's not just another, I mean, we have family there, and everything that he posts on the internet can have an implication for our family members and whether or not they get to see another day. So and being all the way in the US, like, it's really heartbreaking and sad.
Nagar Mortazavi organised this event. She shares that deep worry for family back home.
Well, absolute horror and shock when people saw, for example, the post when Donald Trump said everyone should evacuate Tehran. We're talking about a metropolis of 10 million people, women, children, elderly, disabled. Where are they going to go? How are they going to immediately evacuate? People try to get out of Tehran even before that order was sent, and there were long lines to get out of the city, congested road, hours and hours waiting at gas stations to just fill up your tank. So these things are not easy. They have real life consequences. These are real people we're talking about. It's not a video game. And I just don't think the U.S. has a long-term proper strategy, and also that strategy doesn't really correspond with the campaigning and the planning that the president had put in place during his election.
Israel has full operational control of the skies. They can pick whatever target they want to pick in Iran.
There's a lot of talk here about Donald Trump's non-intervention campaign promises. Members of his own party have been very vocal about them, leaving people in this room with some unlikely Republican allies.
Yeah, I had to retweet Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day. Me too. Good Lord. I would too. When did MTG become the most sane member of Congress on one issue?
I'm an Iranian American, and I'm just so frustrated with what's going on, and I really want to find some inspiration to do something.
We see diplomacy on the news, we see the global conversations among leaders, but this is a big issue for people, regular folks, right?
Absolutely. Americans are sick and tired of getting into wars that have nothing to do with American interest. We've been dragged into them by different interest groups, and that needs to stop. This is one reason why a lot of people voted for Donald Trump for president.
Who is Donald Trump listening to?
Donald Trump listens to whoever it will be most advantageous for him. That's pretty much all that you can say about that, is that he will ultimately listen to the individuals that he thinks will make him either look the best or, approve his ego or he doesn't have that ability in foreign policy and diplomacy. So he's very much influenced for whoever knows how to be, basically play with his ego.
Most people who've gathered here have a dim view of America's current role in the region.
How would you rate the efficacy of U.S. leadership right now when it comes to the Middle East?
Horrific. Absolutely horrific. I mean, we should not be supporting Israel. Israel is a pariah state in the eyes of most people around the world. And the fact that the U.S. continues to send bombs day after day after day to Israel to slaughter people in Gaza and now supplying the weapons that have been killing mostly civilians in Iran as well is horrible.
The White House surely knows there is little appetite for war. Protests and polls show that American involvement in Israel's fight with Iran is highly unpopular. As the long-standing conflict between these two sides reaches new heights.
So what's striking is how hard people are finding the unpredictability of all of this. So how is Donald Trump's often erratic approach shaping this crisis? Joining me to discuss that and more are two faces that you may recognise from our report. Alan Eyre, Distinguished Fellow at the Middle East Institute and former member of the US nuclear negotiating team with Iran, and Negar Mortazavi, who is an American-Iranian journalist and senior fellow at the Center for International Policy, also host of the Iran podcast. Alan, let me start with you. So we've had US strikes, ceasefires, praising Israel, admonishing Israel, let's talk, let's not talk. Does Donald Trump need to pick a lane here, or is there some kind of strategy to this unpredictability?
First, thanks for having me. I don't necessarily see a coherent strategy in what the U.S. has done during this war, but fortunately, we've gotten all the breaks. So the ceasefire started. The U.S. bombing of the Iranian nuclear strikes did not lead to a regional escalation. So what's more important now in terms of the U.S. administration's strategy is the U.S. administration now needs to bring consistent pressure, diplomatic pressure on Iran to negotiate with the U.S., which wasn't the case before this war started, and also consistent pressure on both sides, Iran and Israel, to maintain the ceasefire so we can give diplomacy a chance.
Is diplomacy dead, do you think, after this, which is the view that some people have got?
I think it was temporarily. So the Israeli attack really also targeted diplomacy between Iran and the U.S., which was scheduled for 2 days after the attacks came, and it did put it on pause because the Iranians were saying we're not going to negotiate about a nuclear program while that program is being bombed. But now I think there is a chance, again, for diplomacy. The Iranians have signaled that they're ready. I think President Trump, at the end of the day, wants diplomacy to work, even though I don't think he knows exactly how to get there. But I agree with Alan. There just needs to be pressure for the ceasefire to hold. And then also serious diplomacy, which now there's also a lot less trust between the two sides. So to consider that, and then also to give diplomacy a serious chance.
Alan, I'm interested in this claim of obliteration, which is being contested from people who are expert in all of this. What have you made looking at those images? And is it even possible to totally eradicate Iran's nuclear program militarily?
That's a great question. I'm not an imagery analyst, so I certainly haven't seen the classified imagery for battle damage assessment. But I would contend, in the larger sense, it doesn't matter. Whether Fordo was totally obliterated, partially obliterated, Iran has lots of mountains. It's got lots of earth excavating equipment. It can build new sites. So it is, even though these strikes have in fact set back Iran's nuclear program considerably, and the range of estimate is months to longer, it has not and it cannot obliterate Iran's ability to build a nuclear weapon should it decide to do so without subsequent attacks. They have the technological infrastructure, they have the know-how, Iran's nuclear program is redundant, it's decentralized. Obviously, they haven't gotten all of it. So the key question now is, did these attacks make Iran more desirous of getting a nuclear weapon, or will it lead to some sort of diplomatic agreement?
Yeah, which, Nagar, is my question to you. What do you think this situation is doing for Iran's nuclear ambitions, having been emasculated and humiliated in this way?
I agree with Alan, and I mean, nuclear experts had said before there is no destroying it with aerial bombing, sporadic or one-time aerial bombing by Israel, even the United States. The fate of the uranium is also unknown because the Iranians are claiming that they had moved the material out of the sites, they had advance notice, and the chatter of the attacks were already out there for a few days. So as far as the success of just destroying, I don't think that's really matters. I agree with Alan. You also can't bomb the knowledge, the know-how that they've acquired over the years, and you certainly can't bomb determination. In fact, I think these attacks have added to that determination to keep a program civilian or potentially more clandestine, more underground. As Alan says, lots of mountains. It's a very big country. And outside of that international safeguards, monitoring and inspections regime, which Iran is a signatory to. Yes, there have been challenges, but at the end of the day, they are part of the NPT, and they had threatened that they would leave that non-proliferation treaty with these attacks. So if Iran does build a more clandestine, underground, whatever, a different nature of a nuclear program, we can thank these attacks for it.
Yeah, what about regime change, Alan? Because you've got the administration line and then Donald Trump saying that he's open to the idea of it. What do you make of that?
I think he subsequently walked that back, saying that regime change in Iran is a bad idea because it would lead to chaos. Again, regardless of U.S. preferences, regime change, which historically has not worked out well for the U.S., is very hard to do. I think perhaps a more accurate term is regime degradation. I think Israel's goal remains so degrading this regime's ability to govern that it cannot project power outside its borders, and that it's preoccupied with trying to meet the needs of its people, which will become increasingly harder. So I think the Israeli war goal of degrading this regime is still on the table. But as you say, to me, it's unclear as to what the new U.S. goals will be. You know, when Steve Witkoff sits down at that negotiating table and says, here's what we want, will that include something more maximalist than what was on the table, 13 days ago? That's one of the key things I'll be watching.
And obviously, Alan, you were part of massive negotiations years ago that led to the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Former Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrote recently, in the aftermath of all this in the New York Times, in reference to tearing up the Iran nuclear deal, Mr. Trump, in essence, is now trying to put out a fire on which he poured gasoline, essentially by pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Would we be in this situation, Nagar, if he had not pulled out of that deal?
I don't think so. That was a legacy of the Obama administration that Alan helped deliver. And I just want to emphasize that negotiation took 2 years of intense meetings. Alan was on the inside. But to think that you can get a deal in 60 days, which is what the deadline this administration gave itself, also, I think, sort of puts that in context for you. But so pouring gas or creating a problem that wasn't a problem. It was resolved, by a previous administration, and also how that harmed the credibility of the United States from the viewpoint of the global community. You go, you negotiate, you sign, you shake hands, and that's the United States, regardless of which party or which president did it. And then for the party to change, a president come in and not like the deal just because it was the previous guy who made it happen, and to tear it up and to try to find something better, which didn't happen, and then all of this chaos and conflict to come out of it.
Alan, I'm really interested in your perspective, having been at the heart of that painstaking process that led to the Obama-era deal. Do you look at what's happening now and just think, guys, I worked really hard to avoid this. You're not the only one. I know there was a huge team, but what's your level of frustration when you see what's happening now? Do you believe that it wouldn't be happening had America stuck with the deal?
First, let me point out, I don't want to overrate my role in the nuclear negotiations.
We had more to do with them. Okay. It's safe to say.
I don't want my former nuclear negotiating colleagues to speed dial me now and say, why are you claiming all the credit? It's a mistake when you talk about decision hygiene to judge a decision based on the outcome. A good decision is one where someone looks at all the possible outcomes and makes an optimal decision. So the fact that pulling out of the JCPOA ended horribly doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad decision. I do think it was a bad decision. It's suboptimal. But I just wanted to make that little caveat. Yeah, I think it led to bad consequences, as did the U.S. attack on Iran a couple of days ago. As I said, that could have been a lot worse. So I think right now both sides need to give maximum chance of diplomacy, because there's a very small chance this is going to work out. I'm very pessimistic that we can reach a diplomatic solution, but we need to give it our best shot. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done, Alan. Thank you, Nagar. Thank you both for your time today. It's a high-stakes situation with big implications for the region and the rest of the world. We'll be keeping a close eye on Iran as the story continues to unfold. We'll see you next time.